Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. My career, if you could even call it that, was dying. It wasn't a dramatic, fiery death. It was a slow, quiet suffocation on a Friday night at a club called the Blue Cat. The name promised something cool and jazzy, but the reality was stale beer, sticky floors, and an audience of about 12 people who looked like they'd lost a bet to be here. The spotlight felt less like a beacon and more like an interrogation lamp. I could feel a bead of sweat tracing a path from my temple down my jaw. I was bombing. Every punchline I delivered landed with a soft, wet thud in the thick, indifferent air. "So my girlfriend, she has this cat." "Right," I began, my voice already sounding thin and reedy to my own ears. "And this cat, it just stares at me all day. I think it's plotting my demise." I said to her, "Honey, I think your cat is trying to kill me." And she said, "Well, you have to admit, you are pretty annoying." Silence. A man in the front row took a long, noisy sip of his drink. A woman yawned, not even bothering to cover her mouth. I could see my own reflection in the vacant eyes of the audience, a desperate, 29-year-old man named Alfred, clinging to a dream that had long since packed its bags and left town. A couple in the back, the ones who had been whispering the whole time, finally stood up. The scrape of their chair legs against the floor was louder than any laugh I'd gotten all night. They didn't even look at me as they left. They just walked out, leaving a void where a tiny flicker of my hope had been. "Don't worry, folks," I stammered, trying to fill the dead air. "They're just going to get the cat for a second opinion." Nothing. Not a chuckle, not a groan, just the hum of the beer cooler and the distant clang of a glass in the bar area. I felt a cold dread wash over me. It was the comedian's ultimate nightmare, the utter absence of sound. It was the sound of my own irrelevance. I stood there, bathed in that lonely light, and a thought, dark and sharp, pierced through my panic. If I can't make them laugh, maybe I'll just disappear tonight. My time was up. I mumbled a thank you that no one heard and walked off the stage, my shoes sticking to the floor with each defeated step. The club owner, a gruff man named Sal, just shook his head as I passed. He didn't have to say a word. I knew I wouldn't be booked here again. Backstage was just a glorified closet filled with forgotten props and the ghosts of better performances. A broken stool, a box of rubber chickens, a feather boa that was shedding pink feathers all over the dusty floor. I slumped against the wall, my head in my hands, trying to breathe. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I had failed, again, utterly and completely. My eyes scanned the junk, landing on a forgotten garment bag hanging from a hook. It was from a one-woman show that had passed through months ago. The actress had left some of her costume pieces behind. Curiosity, or maybe just a desperate need for distraction, made me get up. I unzipped the bag. Inside was a simple floral dress. It was made of a soft, thin cotton, with a pattern of tiny blue and yellow flowers. Next to it was a cream-colored cardigan, a bit frayed at the cuffs. At the bottom of the bag was a small, beat-up makeup case. I stared at the items, and a wild, insane idea began to form in the ruins of my mind. It wasn't a logical thought. It was a desperate lunge in the dark, a joke born not of wit, but of sheer, unadulterated panic. I looked at my own reflection in the cracked, grimy mirror on the wall. I saw my tired eyes, my tense jaw, the flop sweat plastering my hair to my forehead. I saw Alfred, the failure. I tried a weak smile. "If I can't make them laugh," I whispered to my pathetic reflection, "then maybe she can." My hands moved before my brain could stop them. I pulled the dress out of the bag. The fabric felt cool and impossibly light in my hands. I stripped off my damp shirt and jeans, my heart hammering against my ribs. The dress slid over my head, and the soft cotton whispered against my skin. It was a strange, alien sensation. It wasn't just fabric. It was a different kind of space, a different way of being held. It settled on my shoulders and fell to my knees, loose and freeing. Next, the makeup case. I fumbled it open. The smell hit me first, a powdery, slightly sweet scent of foundation and old lipstick. I'd never touched makeup in my life. I picked up the foundation sponge and stared at it. Then, clumsily, I started dabbing the cool liquid onto my face. smearing it around until my stubble was less noticeable, my skin an unnaturally smooth canvas. My hands were shaking as I opened a tube of red lipstick. It smelled like cherries and wax. I smeared it on my lips, going way outside the lines. I looked like a clown, a tragic, horrifying clown. I wiped it off, leaving a pink stain, and tried again. More carefully this time. The thick, waxy feeling was bizarre. I could feel it with every breath. I found a pair of false eyelashes, still stuck to their plastic tray. They looked like tiny, delicate spiders. Peeling one off, I tried to stick it to my eyelid. It poked me in the eye, and I flinched, a tear rolling down my cheek, leaving a clean track through the foundation. It took 3 tries, but I finally got them on, crooked but attached. The feeling was maddening. With every blink, I could feel the feathery weight of them brushing against my skin. It was like having a tiny, persistent moth fluttering on my face. There was a cheap synthetic wig in a tangled heap. I put it on, a cascade of dark, wavy hair falling around my shoulders. It was itchy and hot. I pulled on the cardigan, its soft wool a comforting weight on my arms. I looked in the mirror again. The person staring back was a mess, a hastily assembled collection of female signifiers. The lipstick was smudged. The eyelashes were crooked. The wig was slightly askew. But under the mess, there was someone else. Someone I had never seen before, a stranger with my eyes. Sal poked his head through the doorway. "Hey, Al, the next guy canceled. You got another 5 minutes in you?" The crowds, well, they're still here. This was it, the moment where I could back out, take off this ridiculous costume, and go home to my empty apartment. But the thought of going back out there as Alfred, of facing that silence again, was more terrifying than this. I took a deep, shaky breath, the scratchy wig shifting on my head. I looked at the stranger in the mirror. For the first time all night, a genuine, albeit terrified, smile touched my lips. I adjusted my dress. When I walked back toward the stage, my bare legs felt cold and exposed. The thin cotton of the dress swished around my knees with a sound I'd never heard my own clothes make. I stepped into the light, and a ripple went through the small audience. It started as a murmur, a confused whisper. Then, a man chuckled. Another one joined him. I walked to the microphone, my body feeling awkward and gangly. I didn't know how to stand, how to hold my hands. I hugged the cardigan around myself. I leaned into the mic, my voice coming out higher than usual, a nervous, shaky squeak. "Hello," I said, my new eyelashes fluttering with each blink. "My name is Alfreda, and I'm here to save a man named Alfred. He's dying back there." A laugh, a real genuine laugh erupted from the front row. It was like a splash of cold water, shocking and electric. The sound spread. The woman who had yawned was now smiling, her eyes wide with amusement. Another laugh joined the first, and then another. Soon, the whole room was filled with it. It wasn't the polite tittering I was used to. It was real, belly-deep laughter. A surge of something adrenaline, relief, terror shot through me. For the first time, I felt powerful on that stage. I hadn't even told a joke yet. They were laughing at the sheer absurdity of me, of this moment, and it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The first applause I'd heard all night washed over the stage. It wasn't a standing ovation, but it was real. And in that moment, as the warm light hit my made-up face and the sound of their delight filled my ears, Alfreda came to life. After my 5 minutes were up, I practically floated off stage, the laughter still echoing behind me. Sal stared at me, his mouth agape. "What the hell was that?" he asked, but there was a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. It was weird, but they liked it. I stumbled back into the dusty closet and closed the door, my back sliding down the rough wood until I was sitting on the floor. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a profound, trembling shock. I looked down at my hands. They were large and clumsy, but they were covered in chipped red nail polish I'd found in the makeup case. I stared at them, turning them over and over in the dim light. They didn't look like my hands anymore. I hadn't told a single good joke. I had just been her, and they had loved her. A single heart-wrenching thought solidified in my mind. I've never felt anyone love me the way they just loved her. And I didn't know if that was the most wonderful or the most terrifying realization of my entire life. The laughter from the club followed me home. A phantom echo in my ears. I didn't take off the dress or wipe off the makeup. I drove the 20 minutes to my small, sad apartment in a daze, the steering wheel feeling foreign under my polished nails. The dress, the wig, the lipstick, it all felt like a costume I was afraid to remove because I didn't know who I'd find underneath. Alfred, the failed comedian, or someone else entirely. When I got home, I carefully folded the floral dress and the cardigan, placing them in a cloth grocery bag as if they were sacred relics. I tucked the makeup case beside them. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. It felt like throwing away a life raft. The next day was a Saturday, which meant my weekly visit to my mother, my mom, Martha. Lived in the same small suburban house I'd grown up in. It was a house of quiet routines and the lingering scent of fabric softener. She had been a seamstress for most of her life, and though she was retired, her hands were never still. She was always mending a hem or knitting a scarf. I walked in, and she was in her armchair, a half-finished blue sweater in her lap. She looked up and smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. They were the same eyes I saw in the mirror every morning, just kinder. "There's my boy," she said, her voice warm and steady. "How was the show last night? Did you knock 'em dead?" I sank onto the sofa opposite her, the worn floral pattern familiar and comforting. I couldn't meet her gaze. I just stared at my hands. "Not exactly," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "It was bad. Mom, really bad, until it wasn't." She put her knitting down, giving me her full attention. "What does that mean, sweetie?" I took a breath. The confession felt heavy in my chest. A shameful secret I didn't know how to voice. They didn't like me. They didn't like my jokes. They didn't laugh. A couple walked out. "Oh, Alfred, I'm so sorry." "That's not it," I said, finally looking up at her. "Something happened. I did something different backstage. There was this old costume, a dress, some makeup." I watched her face carefully for any sign of judgment, of disgust, but there was only a quiet, patient curiosity. She just waited for me to continue. "I put it on," I said, the words feeling ridiculous as they came out. I went back on stage as a woman, as this character. I called her Alfreda. I paused, bracing myself, and she prompted gently. "And they laughed. Mom," I said, a tremor in my voice. They loved her for the first time. I felt like I connected with them, but it wasn't me they were connecting with. A wave of emotion washed over me, hot and confusing. It was her, the audience. They didn't like me. They liked her. A long silence settled between us. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was thoughtful. My mother picked up her knitting again, her needles making a soft, rhythmic clicking sound. Finally, she looked at me, her gaze clear and direct. "Who is she?" The question caught me off guard. I was expecting a lecture, or at least a confused, "Why would you do that?" But her question was simple, and yet I had no answer. I don't know anymore," I confessed, the words raw and honest. She stopped knitting and set the sweater aside for good. She gave me a small, sad smile. But it wasn't a smile of pity. It was one of profound understanding. "Alfred," she said softly, "all your life you've been trying so hard to be something you think other people want. The funny guy, the good son. Maybe you just got tired of the costume you were already wearing." She leaned forward slightly. "If you feel more real when you're her, then maybe she's the real you." I stared at her, my throat tight. I had expected to be ashamed, to be told I was being foolish or strange. Instead, she was handing me permission, acceptance. Later that afternoon, the strangest thing happened. She got up and went to her bedroom, coming back with a small, wooden box. It was her old sewing box, but I knew she kept other things in there too. Trinkets, memories. "Come here," she said, patting the space next to her on the sofa. I sat down, and she opened the box. Inside, nestled amongst spools of thread and old buttons, was her makeup. A simple compact of powder, a tube of dusty rose lipstick, a small bottle of foundation. "Let's try this again," she said, her voice practical, as if she were about to teach me how to darn a sock. "That stage stuff is probably terrible for your skin." She led me to the bathroom, to the big, well-lit mirror over the sink where I had learned to shave. But today was a different lesson. We stood there, side by side, our reflections looking back at us. My mother, with her soft, graying hair and her gentle, capable hands, and me, looking pale and lost. Her touch was light as she showed me how to apply the foundation evenly, how to blend it at the jawline so it looked natural. "You have good skin," she murmured, more to herself than to me, "just like your grandmother." She taught me how to apply just a little bit of blush high on the cheekbones. "To give you some life," she explained. The lipstick she chose was subtle, a shade that just enhanced the natural color of my lips. As she applied it, her hand steady, I felt a wave of shame so intense it almost made me pull away. What was I doing? And this was wrong. This was a perversion. But then I looked in the mirror. The face staring back was still mine, but softened. The harsh angles of my jaw seemed less pronounced. The color on my cheeks and lips made my eyes look different, brighter. I saw a hint of the stranger from the nightclub, but this version wasn't a caricature. She was quiet, she was tentative, she was pretty. A knot in my chest I didn't even know I was carrying began to loosen. The shame was still there, a low hum in the background, but for the first time, it was accompanied by another feeling, a quiet sense of peace. It was like I was seeing myself clearly for the first time, without the pressure of being Alfred, the man who was supposed to be funny, the man who was supposed to be, well, a man. My mother reached into a drawer and pulled out a pair of simple, small silver hoop earrings. They had been hers. "Here," she said, pressing them into my palm. The metal was cool against my skin. Every woman needs a good pair of earrings. My ears weren't pierced. I just held them, their small weight feeling immense in my hand. It was more than a piece of jewelry. It was a small piece of her acceptance, a tangible sign that I wasn't alone in this. That evening, I left my mother's house with the grocery bag containing the floral dress, but now her old makeup and the silver earrings were in there too. When I got home, I didn't hide the bag in the back of my closet. I placed it on the chair in my bedroom. Before going to sleep, I stood in front of my own bathroom mirror, slowly, hesitantly. I took out the makeup and began to recreate what my mother had taught me. My hands were still clumsy, but it was easier this time. I slipped the dress on over my t-shirt and shorts. The fabric felt familiar now, almost comforting. I put the wig on. And then I just stood there, looking at Alfreda in the mirror. Not the desperate, frantic creature from backstage at the club, but this softer, quieter person my mother had helped me find. A tear escaped my eye and traced a path through the foundation, just like the night before. But this time, it wasn't a tear of panic. It felt like coming home to a place I had never known existed. The next Friday at the Blue Cap was different. Sal had called me on Wednesday. "Hey, Al," he'd grunted, you bringing your friend on Friday?" He couldn't even say it, but the meaning was clear. He wasn't booking Alfred, he was booking Alfreda. The transformation happened at home this time, not in a grimy backstage closet. It was slow, deliberate. I used my mother's makeup, my hands steadier now. I applied the foundation, the blush, the soft pink lipstick. I put on the floral dress. But this time I added a pair of simple flats I'd bought at a thrift store. They pinched my wide feet, but they felt right. The last touch was the wig, which my mother had helped me wash and comb until it looked less like a prop and more like real hair. Looking in the mirror, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilarating rightness. On stage, something shifted. The first few shows as Alfreda had been a performance. I was Alfred playing a woman. I was leaning into the joke, the absurdity of my deep voice coming from a woman in a floral dress. But that night, I wasn't playing her anymore. I was just being. I didn't talk about cats or girlfriends. I talked about the agony of trying on shoes when you have big feet. I talked about the sheer terror of trying to master liquid eyeliner. I talked about a conversation I'd overheard between two women at the grocery store. The jokes came from a place of observation, not fabrication, and the audience, which was bigger now, A mix of curious regulars and new faces. They didn't just laugh, they connected. Night after night, the line between Alfred and Alfreda blurred. I found myself thinking as her even when I was off stage. I started noticing things Alfred never had: the cut of a woman's dress, the scent of her perfume as she walked by, the way a certain fabric moved in the wind. I started caring more about my appearance. I kept my nails clean. I moisturized. The skin on my face, from wearing makeup so often, became softer. One night, after a particularly good set, I was in my dressing room. Sal had cleared out the junk and given me the closet as my own permanent space, and I was taking off the makeup. I wiped away the foundation, the blush, the lipstick. I took off the wig, and I stared at Alfred in the mirror. For the first time, he was the one who looked like a costume. His face looked bare, harsh, and unfamiliar. My heart started to beat a little faster, a cold panic rising in my throat. Who was I when the laughter died down and the makeup was gone? Who was left? The fear began to grow. I didn't know who the audience was cheering for. Was it the clever comedian or the novelty act? Were they laughing with me or at the man in the dress? A few weeks later, a new routine began. After every show, a small bouquet of daisies would be waiting for me at the bar. No big declaration, just a simple card with a single sentence, written in neat, block letters. The first one said, "Your comedy feels like truth." The next week, "Thank you for making me laugh." I never saw who left them. I would take them home and put them in a glass on my kitchen table, and I would stare at them for hours. They were for her, for Alfreda. One Friday, the bouquet was there as usual, but this time the card was different. It said, "Your performance made me believe in the truth of myself. Thank you, Liam." Liam. The name echoed in my head, a man's name. I held the card, my fingers trembling. A man thought Alfreda was beautiful, was truthful. A wave of something warm and terrifying washed over me. What would he think if he knew the truth? If he saw the man under the dress? I sat with that bouquet all night, the sweet, earthy smell of the daisies filling my apartment, my heart a tangled mess of fear and a strange, unfamiliar flutter of pride. The conflict was tearing me apart. During the day, I was Alfred, a quiet man who went to the grocery store and did his laundry, feeling like an imposter in his own skin. At night, I was Alfreda, confident and beloved, but terrified of being exposed as a fraud. The duality was unsustainable. I felt like I was being stretched in two, and something was about to snap. That Sunday, I called my mom. My voice was thick with unshed tears. "Mom." "Hi, sweetie, how are you?" "Not good," I choked out. I think I'm in trouble." "What's wrong, Alfred?" The sound of my own name felt like a punch to the gut. It didn't fit anymore. It was a suit that was too tight, a label that no longer applied. "That's the problem," I whispered, tears finally breaking free and streaming down my cheeks. I don't think I'm Alfred anymore. I don't feel like him. When I'm on stage, as Alfreda, I'm not acting. I'm not pretending. I think that's who I really am." The words hung in the air, spoken for the first time. The truth of them was terrifying and liberating all at once. "Mom," I said into the silence, "are you there?" I heard her take a slow, deep breath on the other end of the line. Her voice, when she spoke, was the softest I had ever heard it. It was gentle, like she was handling the most delicate piece of china. "Okay," she said simply. "Okay, honey." I think I'm her. Mom, I'm really her." "I know, sweetie," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I think I've known for a while." She paused, and I heard her shuffling something. "You know, when you were born, if you had been a girl, your father and I were going to name you May, after your great-grandmother. She was the strongest woman I ever knew." May. The name settled into my heart, not with a crash, but like a soft blanket. It felt right. It felt like my own. It wasn't a stage name, a character I put on. It was a gift. "My name is May," I whispered, trying it out. The sound of it on my own lips was the most natural thing in the world. "Hello, May," my mother said. her voice full of a love so pure and unconditional it made me weep. "It's so nice to finally meet you." In that moment, Alfreda, the character born of desperation in a dusty backstage closet, faded away, and in her place, a real person began to take her first, tentative steps into the light. My name was May, and for the first time, I felt like I truly existed. The decision to live as May wasn't a finish line. It was a starting gate. The phone call with my mother unlocked something deep inside me, a permission slip to finally stop fighting myself. The first, and most terrifying, step was making an appointment at a gender clinic. Walking in, I felt the eyes of everyone in the waiting room on me. I was still dressed as Alfred, in my usual jeans and a hoodie, and I felt like a complete imposter. The woman at the desk called out, "Alfred," and my stomach lurched. I almost didn't stand up. The doctor was kind, a woman with a calm voice who asked me questions not about what I was, but about how I felt. I told her everything about the crushing loneliness, the stage, the floral dress, the feeling of rightness in my mother's bathroom mirror. For the first time, I was talking to a professional, and she didn't treat me like I was crazy. She treated me like a person navigating a profound journey. Starting hormone therapy was a quiet revolution. The first change wasn't something anyone could see. It was a feeling. A few weeks after my first dose of estrogen, I woke up one morning and the world just felt more calmer. The constant, low-level static of anxiety that had been the soundtrack to my entire life had been turned down. Then came the physical changes, subtle at first, then undeniable. My skin, which had always been rough, started to soften. The scent of my own body changed, becoming less musky and more subtle. The most startling change was emotional. I cried at a commercial for phone service. I cried because a bird was singing outside my window. I had spent my entire life as Alfred building walls around my feelings, and suddenly, they were all spilling over. It was overwhelming, but it was also a relief. I was finally feeling everything. My mother was my anchor through all of it. She saw the journey not as a loss of her son, but as the blossoming of her daughter. She declared we needed to have a proper Daughter's Day. "We're going to do this right," she announced one Saturday, her eyes sparkling with determination. No more thrift store shoes that pinch. Our first stop was a proper department store. Walking through the doors, I was hit with a wave of perfume in the bright, overwhelming world of women's fashion. I felt clumsy and out of place, a giant in a land of delicate things. But my mom took my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "Every woman needs a perfect dress," she said, leading me to a rack of colorful garments. The dressing room was a chamber of horrors and wonders. The first few dresses I tried on were a disaster. Zippers got stuck. Fabric clung in all the wrong places. I felt like a clumsy boy playing dress-up. I was about to give up when my mom handed me a simple, elegant wrap dress in a deep shade of teal. "Try this one," she urged. "The cut is flattering on everyone." I slipped it on. The fabric was soft and heavy, draping over my slowly changing body in a way that felt right. I tied the sash at my waist, and when I looked in the mirror, I gasped. For the first time, I didn't see Alfred in a dress. I saw May. My shoulders looked less broad, my waist more defined. The woman staring back at me looked graceful. She looked happy. Next was the shoe department. My mother insisted I try on a pair of low heels. I stumbled like a newborn foal, convinced I was going to break an ankle. But my mom held my arm, patient and encouraging. "Walk heel to toe," she coached. "You'll get it." And after a few wobbly circuits around the shoe racks, I did. The feeling of standing just a little bit taller, the subtle shift in my posture, was intoxicating. The final stop was the most significant, a real hair salon. The smell of hairspray and shampoo was thick in the air. "I'm tired of that scratchy old wig," my mother said. "It's time you had your own hair." My hair had grown out a bit, but it was still an awkward, shaggy length. I sat in the stylist's chair, my heart pounding. A kind woman named Chloe wrapped a cape around my neck. "So, what are we thinking today?" she asked, smiling at my reflection. I looked at my mom, who just nodded at me, giving me the floor. I want to look like me," I said, my voice small. I want it to look soft, feminine. Chloe listened, her expression kind and understanding. She talked about layers and framing my face. Then came the snip of her scissors. With each cut, I felt like a piece of the old Alfred was falling away to the floor. She dyed my mousy brown hair a warm, rich auburn color and blew it out so it fell in soft waves around my shoulders. The whole time, my mom sat in a nearby chair, sipping a cup of tea, a peaceful, proud look on her face. When Chloe finally turned me around to face the mirror, I couldn't breathe. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, but a welcome one. Her hair glowed under the salon lights. Her eyes, framed by the soft new hairstyle, looked bigger, brighter. She looked like the woman I'd always felt I was on the inside. Tears welled in my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered to Chloe. On the car ride home, my mother reached over and squeezed my hand. The setting sun streamed through the window, catching the red highlights in my new hair. "You know," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "when your father passed, I thought my life as a parent was mostly over. I never thought I'd get to have these moments." She looked at me, her eyes shining. "I finally have my daughter." A tear rolled down my cheek, but for once, it was a tear of pure, unadulterated joy. I squeezed her hand back. "No, Mom," I said, my voice clear and steady. "You finally have your child, the real one." Back at her house, we did what we had started to do every weekend. We cooked dinner together, my new slightly longer nails making a soft clicking sound on the countertop as I chopped vegetables. We sat and talked, me in my new teal dress, her in her comfortable armchair. I was learning how to exist in this new body, how to move, how to speak, how to just be. It wasn't about performing anymore. It was about living, and with my mother by my side. I felt, for the first time in my life, that I had finally, truly, come home to myself. After my daughter's day with Mom, I decided it was time. Alfreda had served her purpose. She had been the brave pioneer who mapped this new territory for me. But I wasn't Alfreda anymore. I was May. I called Sal and told him I was changing my stage name. "May?" he asked, confused. What happened to Alfreda? That name was getting popular. "Alfreda was a character," I explained, my voice steadier than I felt. "May is me." To my surprise, he just grunted. "Okay, kid, May it is. Don't be late Friday." The first time the announcer at the Blue Cat said, "Please give a warm welcome to May," my heart nearly beat out of my chest. I walked out on stage in my new teal dress and my low heels, my auburn hair catching the light. The regular audience members looked a little confused, but I just smiled. My act had changed. I was still a comedian, but my jokes were gentler, more personal. I talked about my transition, about the absurdities of learning to be a woman in your late 20s. I found the humor in my voice cracking when I tried to order a coffee, in the struggle to find clothes that fit my still-changing body, in my mother's well-intentioned but sometimes awkward advice. I was vulnerable, and the audience responded with a warmth that went beyond just laughter. It felt like acceptance. After my set one night, as I was packing my bag, I heard a soft knock on my dressing room door. I opened it to see a young man standing there, looking nervous. He had kind eyes and a shy smile. He was holding a small bouquet of daisies. My breath hitched. It was him, Liam. "Hi," he said, his voice quiet. "I'm Liam. I hope this isn't weird. I just wanted to meet you in person. Your set was amazing." He looked at me, at May, not with the curiosity of someone looking at a spectacle, but with genuine admiration. He wasn't seeing a man in a dress. He was seeing a woman on a stage. "You're the one who's been leaving the flowers," I said, my own voice barely a whisper. He blushed. "Yeah, I know it's a bit old-fashioned. Your comedy helped me through a tough time. You seemed so brave, and it made me feel like I could be brave, too." We stood in an awkward, charged silence for a moment. Would you like to get a coffee sometime?" he blurted out, his cheeks turning a deeper shade of red. "I mean, only if you want to. No pressure." A year ago, Alfred would have laughed it off, made a self-deprecating joke, and run in the other direction. But I wasn't Alfred. I was May, and May, I decided in that moment, was brave enough to say yes. Our first date was at a small cafe down the street. It was terrifying and wonderful. For the first time, I was being seen as a woman in a romantic context. He held the door for me. He pulled out my chair. He listened, really listened, when I talked. He asked me about my life, my transition, my dreams. He never once made me feel like a science experiment. He made me feel beautiful. The light, intimate moments were the ones that shook me to my core. When our hands accidentally brushed as we both reached for the sugar, a jolt of electricity shot up my arm. I felt my body respond in a way it never had before, a soft, warm flutter in my stomach, a blush creeping up my neck. I felt delicate, feminine. It was a vulnerability I had never allowed myself to feel, and it was both thrilling and petrifying. We started seeing each other regularly. We went for walks in the park. We visited museums. We stayed up late talking on the phone. With Liam, I felt normal. I felt like just a woman, falling for a man. But the world outside our little bubble wasn't always so kind. One evening, Liam sent me a link to an article on a local entertainment blog. My blood ran cold as I read the headline, "The Blue Cat's new star is comedian May, deceiving her audience with a dress and a sob story." The article was brutal. It dug up my old name, Alfred, painting me as a failed male comedian who had resorted to a cheap gimmick to get laughs. It questioned my identity, calling my transition a performance piece. It used words like fraud and trickster. The screen blurred as tears filled my eyes. Every fear I'd ever had was staring back at me in black and white. They were right. I was a fraud. The laughter wasn't for me. It was for the lie I was selling. The shame was so powerful it felt like a physical blow. I called Liam, my voice breaking. "You saw it!" "May, listen to me," he said, his voice urgent and firm. "That person is an idiot. They don't know you. They see a costume, but I see you. The reason people laugh isn't because you're pretending. They laugh because, for the first time, you're finally being real. Your truth is what makes you so funny and so beautiful." His words were a balm, but the doubt lingered. I called my mom, sobbing. "They think I'm a joke." I cried into the phone. "They think I'm just Alfred in a dress." "Oh, honey," she said, her voice a fierce, protective shield. "Do you think you're Alfred in a dress?" "No," I whispered. "Does Liam?" "No." "Does the laughter in that club sound fake to you?" "No," I admitted. "Then to hell with what anyone else thinks," she said. "You are not a lie. May, you are the truest person I know. Now you wipe your tears, you put on your prettiest dress, and you get back on that stage and you show them what the truth looks like." I hung up the phone, my hands still shaking. I wanted to cancel my show. I wanted to hide. I wanted to crawl back into the safe, invisible skin of Alfred, and disappear. But Liam's and my mother's voices echoed in my head. They saw me. They believed in me. Maybe it was time I started believing in myself. I looked at the teal dress hanging on my closet door. I thought about the first time I wore it, the way it made me feel. I thought about the sound of real laughter, the warmth in Liam's eyes, the pride in my mother's. They weren't cheering for a lie. They were cheering for me. The night I was scheduled to perform after the article came out, my stomach was in knots. Backstage, my little sanctuary felt like a prison cell. Every sound from the audience, every burst of laughter for the opening act felt like a judgment. They were all out there, I thought, waiting to see the fraud, the gimmick. My mother and Liam were in the front row. I had asked them not to come, not wanting them to witness my potential humiliation, but they had refused. "We're not letting you do this alone," Liam had said, squeezing my hand before I went backstage. I stood behind the curtain, my hands clammy. I was wearing a new dress my mom had helped me pick out. It was a simple, confident red wrap dress. It made me feel bold. Even when I was trembling on the inside, I could hear Sal on the stage, doing my introduction. And a comedian who is as honest as she is hilarious. Please give a huge welcome to May. The applause was normal, not hostile, not overly enthusiastic, just a regular Friday night crowd. I took a deep breath and stepped into the light. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I walked to the microphone. the red fabric of my dress swishing around my legs. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw my mom, her expression radiating pure, unconditional love. I saw Liam, his eyes fixed on me, a look of unwavering belief on his face, and I saw dozens of strangers, their faces expectant. I had planned a whole set of my usual jokes, but standing there, in that spotlight, I knew I couldn't do it. I had to address the elephant in the room. I had to tell the truth, my truth. "Hello," I began, my voice a little shaky. "So, some of you may have read an article about me this week." A nervous murmur went through the crowd. It said I was a liar. I continued, my grip tightening on the mic stand. It said that I was a man named Alfred pretending to be a woman named May to get your attention. And, for a little while this week, I almost believed it. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "The truth is," I said, my voice growing stronger, "they were half right. There was a man named Alfred. He was a comedian, and he was terrible. Just awful. He used to stand on this very stage and tell these awful, tired jokes, and no one would laugh. He was trying so hard to be the person he thought everyone wanted him to be, and he was so sad." I saw a few people in the audience nod, a flicker of recognition in their eyes. One night, out of sheer desperation, he put on a dress. It was a crazy, stupid idea, but when he walked out here, something happened. For the first time, you guys laughed, and she felt alive. My eyes scanned the room, making contact with as many people as I could. The article called it a gimmick, a trick, but it wasn't. It was the most honest thing Alfred had ever done, because he wasn't pretending to be a woman. He was finally admitting to himself, and to all of you, that he was one. He was just too scared to say it. I took a shaky breath. "My name is May. I spent 29 years of my life telling bad jokes, in the wrong costume, being up here, like this. This isn't an act. This is the punchline. This is the truth. And yeah, it's a little messy, and it's a little weird, and my voice still drops when I get excited." My voice cracked on the last word, and a gentle laugh rippled through the audience. "I used to think that my only job was to make other people laugh," I said, a real smile finally reaching my face. "But it turns out, to make you laugh for real, I had to learn how to love myself first, and that," I concluded, looking directly at my mother and Liam, "is the funniest, strangest, and most wonderful joke I've ever known." The silence that followed was deafening. For a terrifying second, I thought I had made a horrible mistake. Then someone started to clap. It was a slow, deliberate clap. Another person joined, and then another, and another, until the entire room erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was a wave of sound, a roar of support that washed over me, washing away all the fear and the shame. It was long, and it was loud, and it felt like absolution. I saw Liam on his feet, clapping so hard his hands were red. My mother was standing beside him, tears streaming down her face, a beautiful, proud smile lighting up her entire being. I finished my set that night on pure adrenaline and joy. The laughter was louder and warmer than it had ever been before. It wasn't for Alfred or Alfreda, it was for May. Later that night, my mom and I took a walk through the city streets. The show was over, the club was closed, but the world felt bright and full of possibility. We bought ice cream from a street vendor and walked side by side, our steps in sync. I looked at our reflection as we passed a darkened storefront window. The neon sign from a bar across the street cast a colorful glow on us. I saw two women, a mother and her daughter, laughing, sharing a cone of mint chocolate chip ice cream under the city lights. "I used to think the stage was the most artificial place in the world," I said, my voice full of a quiet wonder, all lights and makeup and pretend. I licked my ice cream cone and looked at my mom, her face aglow in the neon. "But it turns out," I finished, a feeling of profound peace settling over me. It was the only place I could finally be real. She slipped her arm through mine, and we continued our walk into the warm, welcoming night. I was no longer trapped in the laughter of others. I was living in my own,